When my son was murdered, the police thought just another black boy stabbed.
We're just left there, gathering dust. Not right, is it?
You're telling me that there's nothing you can do, and I don't accept that.
Seriously, hasn't this case been investigated to death?
Witnesses say Stephen was set upon by 5 or 6 men.
But is this real? Does the brass actually want us to solve this murder?
The Metropolitan Police have ceased to amaze me.
I told them to send you everything.
Well, they didn't.
It was a brief attack.
Who said it was brief? Go.
Saint Stephen Lawrence. I mean, what makes him so special, eh?
We found Stephen's blood.
Where?
On Gary Dobson's jacket.
We hope to execute the arrests within the week.
We've waited a long time for this.
Stephen starts Monday the 30th of August on ITV and ITV Hub.
Hello all, and welcome to this BFI at home panel. I'm Ayo Akinwolere, I'm a broadcaster, and we are here to discuss Stephen, a 3-part sequel to the groundbreaking single drama, The Murder of Stephen Lawrence, the much admired and influential drama that originally transmitted on ITV in 1999. Now, this sequel is produced with the full support of Doreen and Neville Lawrence, and the drama will portray events from 2006, 13 years after Stephen's death, on the evening of the 22nd of April, 1993, in a racially motivated attack. Now, even though the Lawrences knew the identity of their son's killer, the original investigation had failed to convict those responsible, and their extraordinary campaign for justice led to a public inquiry which branded the Metropolitan Police institutionally racist and brought about sweeping changes in the law, police practices, and also transformed thinking and understanding of racial inequality in the UK. Now, 6 years on from the inquiry, no progress had been made into the case. This drama tells the story of the ongoing struggle by Doreen and Neville Lawrence to achieve justice, and how a detective, DCI Clive Driscoll, working closely with the Lawrences, puts together an investigation that finally, more than 18 years after his death, secures the conviction of 2 of the gang who committed the murder of Stephen. Now, I'm delighted to be joined by some rather incredible humans, some of the cast, and also the people behind this incredible 3-parter. So let's start with Steve Coogan, who plays DCI Clive Driscoll, Hugh Quarshie, who plays Neville Lawrence, Sharlene Whyte, who plays Doreen Lawrence, and executive producer Mark Redhead, producer Madonna Baptiste, writers Frank Cottrell-Boyce, and also Joe Cottrell-Boyce as well. So good to have you all with us.
It's brilliant to be here.
You.
All right, Mark, let's dig into this. I know we haven't got much time. Let's start with you, because you are the original producer of the 1999 drama, The Murder of Stephen Lawrence. Why did you feel this was the right time to revisit this rather remarkable story?
Well, I read Clive's book and I was very moved by it. And actually, I felt that I worked with a young guy here in the company I work for who didn't know anything about the case. And I felt that this was a loss. So decided that it needed to be revived and we needed to tell the ending of the story, which is, as you described, has a bittersweet character to it.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm really interested in sort of, you know, the cast really, and because I always think about these characters that you're playing, you know, given the immense sense of expectation and also additional responsibility in playing these real people caught up in what is a tragic and also emotional fight for justice. I guess, what did it mean to you guys to play these characters? Charlene, should we start with you?
Yeah, I mean, I initially felt a huge responsibility to portray Doreen accurately and authentically and warmly and stoically and everything that Doreen is, and powerful and, you know, strong-minded and strong-willed woman. I won't lie, of course it's daunting because this is a precious woman in certain communities and in society. I think she's a highly revered woman and commands a lot of respect, and rightly so. So it was overwhelming. However, I knew it was above me and I needed to portray Doreen with authenticity in a way that was fair to her.
She's such a pivotal character within this, but also in the entire story of Stephen. As a Black person, did you feel a sense of responsibility to sort of, really?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I felt a huge responsibility, and when it comes out, there'll be even more responsibility because I'll have to talk about it, and people will want to talk about it, and quite rightly so. So yeah, it was a massive responsibility and one I take very seriously. And yeah, as a Black actor, it's almost a dream role. It's a dream to be able to portray Doreen. It's an absolute honor and a pleasure to be associated with her at all. This woman has achieved so much for us in society and changed certain ways of thinking. So yes, I did feel the responsibility.
When my son was murdered, the police thought just another Black boy stabbed. But there's no such thing as just another Black boy. And this building, this center, will say that much more loudly than I can. And the brilliant young people who use this space, they will be Stephen's living legacy.
And Hugh playing Neville.
Yeah, well, I played Neville in the original production Paul Greengrass directed, and at that time I'd spoken to Neville, spent time with him. I had his voice on a loop, because it was important to try to get as close to him as possible, because that was more of a dramatic reconstruction, and I didn't want anybody to feel that I'd let the side down by not sounding and appearing to be Neville. We went to the extent of cutting his hair shape into my hairline. We didn't do that so much this time because while it's important to honor the characters, I also have to acknowledge that I'm not really I'm not too similar to Neville. First of all, he's about 6 inches taller. He's West Indian origin, I'm West African origin, and I'm not as, I haven't embraced religion in the same way that he has, let's put it that way. So that helps in the sense of actually keeping some distance, some objectivity. It's important to try to be both subjective and objective, to see the man that you're trying to portray. And sometimes you might spot something which you find difficult to comprehend in him. The fact that he has apparently, well, not apparently, I know he has publicly forgiven the killers, even though they haven't shown remorse. That's something that I had to work through to try to understand. But I was kind of relieved that Frank and Joe pitched the script at the point before he'd forgiven them. And in fact, but they'd shown that struggle, that the script shows the struggle that he has. And when he's talking to the father of Roland Adams, who says, no, you can't forgive anybody who hasn't shown remorse. So there's a sense in which sometimes it's helpful to be detached from the person you're trying to impersonate.
After Stephen died, after the first trial collapsed, a man came to see me and he said that he could take the burden. Told me that if the police couldn't give me justice, then he could, outside the law. You understand what I'm talking about now?
An eye for an eye. But never wanted.
I told him no, because I knew I didn't want to be like them. I didn't want hate to consume me. But when the Lord tells us, turn the other cheek, I don't know where to begin with that. What does it mean to turn the other cheek? When your son has been murdered, what does anything mean after that?
And Steve, with you playing at DCI Clive Driscoll, what kind of work went into that in understanding who he was as an individual?
Well, I talked to him on Zoom, had a long conversation with him, asked him about his background and why, and I was fascinated by him as the sort of as the decent, honest policeman. He said that one of his heroes was Dixon and Doc Green, was the sort of the honest working class copper. And it's interesting to see that his experience in some ways, although in a very different way from Neville and Doreen, he himself was marginalized in some ways because he wasn't cut from the same cloth as many of the power brokers within the Met. And so you see him subject to a sort of a different kind of prejudice, if you like, in his quest to try and do the right thing. When people, more senior people who act not in terms of integrity or doing the right moral thing, but more in terms of what's the most politically expedient decision, what is the most adept way to protect an institution, rather than what's just a simple act of being honest and doing that phrase that we don't hear very often these days of common decency, which is treating other human beings with respect, which sounds very simple to say, but we don't encounter very often. But I was also pleased about Frank and Joe's script because it celebrated a policeman who does his job by sticking to the rules, not breaking the rules. The idea of the maverick is sort of a cliche in police drama, and I loved the fact that it kicked against that and celebrated those who diligently go about their work uncelebrated, and just for the sake of doing it well.
You say you volunteered to take on my son's case?
I did, sir, yes.
Why you do that?
I think a young lad should be able to catch the bus home without being killed. I mean, if we can't solve a murder like Stephen's, what's the point of this?
Just do your best, officer. That's all we ever ask, you know? Just do your best for Stephen.
I want to, pay tribute to when I got the floor with Sharlene and Hugh, because they made my job as an actor so much easier, because I just believed who they were, within the drama. So when I was in scenes with them, it was just very easy to subsume yourself into the sort of parallel reality of making a drama. I've met Doreen a couple of times because of the work I do with Hacked Off, which is a press reform pressure group, and Sharlene was Doreen Lawrence, as far as I was concerned, when we were doing those scenes, and that really has made my job a lot easier than it would otherwise have been.
Yeah, I mean, look, true respect to Hugh, Sharlene. When you cried, we cried. It was just so touching, and I really thank you for that. Really special characters. And I guess, Sharlene, just on the subject of Doreen, did you ever speak to her about how she found that inner strength, to keep going and until justice was actually achieved?
I didn't get to speak to Doreen, and I feel that was the right decision, because I was able to keep some respectful distance between myself and Doreen as a real person. So I expect still the death of your son would still cut deep and still be a raw emotion, and not something that I'd want for her to relive and experience. I'm just pleased that she's given me her blessing to play her, and giving me that opportunity to respectfully play her in a way that is honest and true. Yeah.
Fair enough. Thank you. Frank and Joe, as the writers, did you feel this huge sense of responsibility on your shoulders as well to get this right? This is a story with so many moving parts, so much nuance attached to it. We're talking institutional racism, we're talking relationships between the police and the Black community. How important was it for the production to have the full backing of both Neville and Lawrence as well?
Well, it wouldn't have happened without Doreen and Neville. We started those conversations with them from the very beginning. They were part of the loop. Massive sense of responsibility to get it right. I'm as an old dramatist, I'm very likely to go off on flights of fancy and stuff like that. So very, very blessed to have Joe there, who is very, very able to keep things onto what really, really happened, you know. And there's a lot of facts to marshal, a lot of facts to retain, a lot of, I think if we got anything wrong, it would completely undermine the credibility of the whole. So stuff that I wouldn't normally be bothered about, timelines and who said what when. So Doreen was fantastically generous with us, Clive was fantastically generous, and Sean as well, Clive's oppo, was brilliantly generous, you know. So it was the responsibility of being answerable to what really happened, I think. Joe, do you want to say?
Yeah, I guess, you know, it was really important that you know, Mark as the executive already had that trust with the Lawrence family, and they were on board from the beginning. I mean, I think 90% of the work really was research, and we were really blessed to have so much source material, so much shared by the Lawrence family, but also by the officers involved. But of course, people have slightly different perspectives and they remember things slightly differently, and it felt really important, especially in a story where there's so much pain and trauma, that those different perspectives were respected and were balanced. I think particularly, you know, in terms of Doreen and Neville's relationship, both, you know, fighting for decades for justice and to change our society, but in parallel, and needing to show that they're kind of, they're slightly different approaches, but how they complement each other in their struggles for justice.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to touch on that, how they complement each other, but also their relationship, really. And I guess this is a question for you, Hugh, because it's never, you know, stated explicitly, but it's kind of woven into the drama, just what a high price the Lawrences paid in their private life for what happened. The end of their marriage, obviously, and Neville's return to Jamaica. Now, do you feel playing him that the lack of justice and the treatment by the police and the justice system had left him, I guess, with little faith in the whole sort of British establishment?
Yeah, I think the cost to their marriage, the impact it's had on them individually and of course on their relationship, can probably not be overstated. But I think it really is sort of great credit of Frank and Joe that they've shown such restraint and sensitivity. And so it is a story that is told more in picture. We show rather than tell, you know, particularly at the end when the flowers are being laid on the, well, I shouldn't give anything away, you know, but, you know, it's, I hope that the cost that they've borne is palpable, is felt, and it is seen. In Neville's case, it might appear that this is somebody who retreated while and leaving Doreen to fight the good fight alone. But I don't think that is the case. This is a man who I think I feel his pain to the extent that I have a son who is now 18, the same age that Stephen was when he was murdered. And I ask myself every day whether I've said and done enough to make him aware of the state of the world. And what do you tell your children? Do you tell them the world is basically a dangerous place full of bad people, or do you actually try to encourage them to recognize the good in it and to reassure them that there are good people there? Just have to keep your wits about you, and everything will be fine. But Neville, I feel, still grapples with that, you know, and I think to some extent wonders what he could have done differently, what he could have done better, what he should have told Stephen perhaps, you know, about walking in Eltham late at night. You know, I wasn't aware that Eltham and I think what's the other place, Thamesmead, had the worst possible reputations in London for Black people, you know. But that sense of remorse, of what I should have done to save my son, and of course, there's nothing you can do to save your kid from a random racist attack. But nevertheless, he's going to carry that with him all his life, and so it wouldn't have been right to, I think, for an actor to go. So Neville, how did you feel about losing your son at the age of 18? That would just not simply be crass, but and insensitive, but I think counterproductive. You know, we are trying to convey our understanding of what it is to feel that loss. This is an exercise in understanding loss and compassion. You know, and I think I hope we can all relate to that without going into the psychological nitty-gritty.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And Steve, I guess one of the most shocking things about the series, in many respects, is the ingrained racism that DCI Driscoll comes up against in trying to reopen this case with his own colleagues in the Metropolitan Police, even in 2006. Well, that's 13 years after the murder. That, you know, it's as if no lessons had sort of been learned from early reports into the failings of the Met. Where do you think his driving determination came from then, to see this really through till the end?
Well, I think it's an important point that you raised, and Frank and Joe in the script, and I have to say, Ulrich Riley, who I've not mentioned so far, who is a fantastic director, always very focused and straightforward, and really safe hands to be in. I think you point out something quite important, which is that you know, a commitment to change something which is institutionally racist. You can't change just by having an inquiry. It requires a cultural change, and those things can't happen quickly. They have to happen slowly. By when society slowly changes, you know, attitudes can change. You know, we look in the 1960s, some of the attitudes towards gay people and all the rest of it. And of course, society can move on, it can change, but it doesn't happen quickly. And having said that, there are people who have a natural sense of justice and don't need to be enlightened, as it were. They just understand what is fair innately. And Clive was one of those people. So, and other people in my life who I feel are, I've regarded as you know, decent people, but they often socialize with people who have those prejudices, and they lurk beneath the surface. And sometimes you can't tell one from another until they open their mouths and talk about it. I'm pleased that there sometimes is a sort of a lazy view that, if you like, the uneducated or academically uneducated are all innately prejudiced, and that's not true. There are decent working class people who have a sense of fairness and justice, you know, and when it comes to racism, there are working class white people who feel strongly about racism, and Clive's one of those people. So I was pleased that the series celebrates that and acknowledges that, because it's you know, it's important to know that there are decent people out there. Yeah, and all is not lost, I suppose.
Jammy win against Liverpool, that.
Jammy? Nothing jammy about it, mate. Pure artistry.
Listen, commiserations, get that case dumped on you. Waste of time and money.
I don't follow.
Saint Stephen Lawrence. I mean, what makes him so special, eh? It's embarrassing how we kowtow to that family just for them to slag us off at every opportunity.
Thing is, we didn't finish the job, did we? I mean, I'd be slagging us off if I was in their shoes.
This one's for you, actually, Madonna. I'm just interested because we've spoken to them, but I'm really interested from your perspective as producer. Why you turn to Frank and Joe to bring this really highly emotive and sort of vitally important story to ITV?
Well, I mean, Frank and Joe are just brilliant writers, but can I pass this over to Mark? Because
Yeah,
Mark was the one who,
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I loved working with Frank and Joe. They are fantastic. And yeah, all the story of that.
Loved working with you too.
So, Mark.
Frank and I had worked together in the past, and Frank is, as Steve has pointed out previously, it's a person who instinctively is interested in people who are good, and that is, you know, most drama is kind of Richard III or Adolf Hitler, but actually what we're, you know, people are really kind of, it's easy, you know, the devil has all the best tunes, and actually, you know, our three principals in this story are all good people, and I know that Frank is drawn to to writing about that, which is unusual, and his body of work repeats that. I think that's right, Frank. You don't very often really write really wicked people, do you? You look for the goodness in people. I think that's right.
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, that's what Doreen's got, isn't it, as well? That's a quality that Doreen has herself, that she'll find the good in a person and make it work. I think if you're going to fix things, you've got to focus on what good looks like. So yeah, I think both Joe and I are very drawn to those kind of stories. And as Mark says, quite a lot of people aren't. So I think that's part of it as well, you know. I mean, I like, as a dramatist as well, like, leaving everything else aside, that relationship between Clive and Doreen is so delicious to write about. That kind of delicacy in that relationship and the respect between them. You don't often see friendship well written about, and that's a proper friendship, but it's a very, very respectful one. He always calls her the Baroness, and he addresses her as Mom, and it's so chivalric and lovely. I mean, so just those are sort of pigments that you don't often see on the palette. You know, they're lovely things to play with, and yeah. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly it. And I think you know, it's an unusual relationship, and I think the thing that connects, I guess the thing that connects them is shared expectations that had just been disappointed so many times. I think Clive's idea of what good policing is about relationships. It's about you know, fairness. It's about going after bullies and actually, you know, trying to make communities safer places. And I think that's exactly what Doreen diagnosed was missing in the police force, that there wasn't that kind of, the talk about relational policing was rhetoric, and it wasn't actually real if you were a black family living in London at that time. And it's you know, that their relationship is in spite of the institution of the Metropolitan Police, but it's also kind of, it's an ideal. It's what policing should be. It's the dream of policing by consent should be, actually being able to connect to communities, connect to people, and build relationships.
So Madonna, did you do anything new in creating this series in terms of how it was crewed and keeping that level of authenticity, which we think is so important in drama such as this?
Yeah, we you know, we made an effort to make sure that we had a fully diverse crew, and I think there's, you know, a real wealth of talent, diverse talent in our UK industry, and a lot of it's been untapped for ages. We were really pleased to have many of our HODs were black, and the crew in general was very diverse. But I also think it's really important that crews in the UK and throughout the world are diverse, because regardless of subject matter, I think it's important that we try that, because it just makes it for a richer experience for everyone and a richer product, I think. And I think hopefully Stephen is an evidence of that.
I'm really interested in this one, actually, and I'd love to throw it onto the floor, and please, whoever would like to answer, please do. But where do we think the Met is now at this moment in time? Have lessons finally been learnt in any way, shape or form?
Well, only last week, a committee of MPs said that the lessons of Macpherson had not been, put through into the way that the police is run, and actually, wider institutions in the UK. So objectively, it would appear that things hadn't improved. Obviously, individuals, there are plenty of individuals. I've met a lot of policemen, and there are a lot of very good policemen, but there obviously there's something about the institution which obviously has got problems.
I think that's exactly it. And I think the police, I've worked with the police quite a lot down the years, and I think they're quite polarized. I think some people get into the police because they want to serve and they want to serve communities, and some people get into the police because they want an experience of power. And I think it's quite polarized in terms of the people that are attracted into the Met. And I think no one knows more about the Metropolitan Police than Doreen Lawrence through just her years of engagement, grueling engagement at times with the Metropolitan Police. I think she has an amazing grasp of the Met as an institution. And so I think we have to listen to her when she says there is a very, very long way to go. I mean, it's not just about representation, but I think it's outrageous that last year the Met only recruited 57 black officers in a city the size of London. I think that just shows the level of distrust, of disconnection between black communities and the police. I think, Doreen and Neville give us reason for hope, but that also needs to go alongside, quite serious reform.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's always quite interesting when we talk about the police, because I guess they're the overriding bastions of keeping our societies together, but actually, how can we not expect what happens outside of these spaces to affect what happens within the police force? If we have racism on our streets in Britain, how can we not expect that to exist within some of our greater institutions? And I think...
Well, can I'll jump in there.
Yeah, sure.
Police should be held to a higher account. It's no good to say that they just reflect society. They need to be better than society. That's the point. And I firstly think that when you have an inquiry that calls an organisation institutionally racist, what often happens is that people retain those attitudes. They just hide them under a bushel. So the prejudices are still there, but they become wise to how they phrase things. And that's actually reflected in Joe and Frank's drama, is that those prejudices are not aired publicly, but they're just below the surface. And if you scratch them, they'll come out. So in some ways, it's harder to detect institutional racism, because those who are racist, if you like, deep down, learn how to modify their behavior so that they can keep going. And that's what I think is probably what's going on to a large extent. I can't castigate all officers, obviously, but I think that's always a problem with a big institution. People need to let's just keep their mouths shut.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I know we haven't got much time left, but just a quick one to you guys. What's the overriding thread you want audiences to take from this? What's the one message that you want audiences to go off and go, do you know what? That's it. That's what I've just got from this drama. Stephen, let's start with you.
I hope people realise that I like the fact that there's hope in this. That the hope that is what's been talked about before, about there are decent people in the world. Which, if you just if you think society is just reflected by the drama that you see, you'd think that we live in a completely dysfunctional world where everyone has an ulterior motive for something. And when in actual fact there are lots of decent people. They just don't crow about it, and they often don't get airtime, and they're not self-proclaimed. They don't proclaim themselves, so they sort of do their decent stuff quietly. But they are out there, and yes, it's. I hope that people, despite the suffering that we sort of revisit in Stephen, that I hope that people realise that doing the right thing is still the best thing to do. If you like.
Sharlene?
I hope that what we can take from the story is that we can spread the story out to people who are not as familiar with the Stephen Lawrence story as a certain generation are. There's a younger generation of people who are out there who are not fully aware of what happened. People like myself who was around, who was a teenager at the time, it's very real and very raw for me. But just for new teenagers and for new young adults to be introduced to the story of Stephen Lawrence, because they may have heard whispers of him, but to accurately learn about his story. And also with Clive Driscoll and his common sense coppering, hopefully some of that can be reintroduced into the Met into the 21st century.
Yeah, quick one from you, Hugh.
Yeah, I really hope that this will make the point that justice is imperative. That if justice is denied or deterred, that has a consequence on the people who are seeking justice. It has a consequence on the rest of society who then sink into a kind of cynicism or apathy and don't see any point in resorting to the police or obeying the law. The imperative of justice. There's a scene there was a scene in the original which I don't think made the final cut, Mark. Do you remember when the Nevilles were approached by some black activists saying, we will provide justice to you. And they pointedly said, no, we'll go through the court, we'll go through the police and the courts. And then again, the scene in this where Neville just reveals that he's been given the option of the killers being taken out, and he decides not to do that. But having decided not to do that, they have to wait years before they get a partial conviction. Justice has been done, but has not been completely done. And I hope that this will have the impact of on an audience saying that justice must be done for the sake of, not just for the sake of the Lawrences, but for the sake of our own society, the sake of our relationship with the police.
Thank you all for your time. This is truly a remarkable three-part series of such a powerful story, great performances, great writing. It's an absolute corker, so thanks so much for your time. Now, before I forget, the BFI is a charity organisation, and details on how to donate is going to pop up on your screens after this. So thank you all so much for joining us. We hope you enjoy the series.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.